Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
The past week has been heartbreaking. We've seen gut-wrenching images of panicked people acting out of sheer desperation. I don't think any one of us can see these pictures and not feel that pain on a human level.
President Biden talking to the nation about Afghanistan for the second time this week. Will all Americans be able to get out safely? And how about our Afghan allies?
My whole arm was just covered in mud and water, and I was like, oh, okay, we need to get out of here because this car is going to sink.
Flash flooding in Massachusetts, stranding cars, and now a hurricane could be heading that way. What's in store where you are this weekend?
How was it to watch the Tokyo Games?
It was a moment of bitterness, but at the same time, it was sweet because it just gives me more. It gives me more time. It gives me more to show the world that I'm here to stay.
She's back in the track and ready to compete. Tom Yamas catches up with Sha'Carri Richardson ahead of the Prefontaine Classic. We start today with the latest Afghanistan fallout. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli in Wilmington, Delaware. So, Mike, this is the biggest foreign policy crisis of Biden's presidency, and it's a big one early on. He said this afternoon, we're making significant progress getting Americans and our allies out of Afghanistan. What else did he say about getting Americans out?
Well, Allison, the president, obviously, this is the second time he's addressing the nation this week about the situation in Afghanistan. And he said there's going to be a time to criticize and second guess the decisions that he's been making. But the focus at this point is on getting Americans, getting our Afghan partners, and a lot of those other foreign nationals who want to get out of Afghanistan. And so we had the president, then a Pentagon briefing, now a State Department briefing, a lot of new information coming to us this afternoon. We learned from an administration official that as of for the past week, 13,000 people have been evacuated out of Afghanistan, about 5,600 of those just in the last 24 hours. Clearly, the president acknowledging some of the chaotic scenes we've been seeing on the ground, but he said it is his absolute conviction that any American who wants to get out will be able to, and he made a pretty strong pledge along those lines. Let's take a listen.
But let me be clear. Any American who wants to come home, we will get you home. But make no mistake, this evacuation mission is dangerous. It involves risks to our armed forces, and it's being conducted under difficult circumstances. I cannot promise what the final outcome will be, or what it will be, that it will be without risk of loss. But as Commander-in-Chief, I can assure you that I will mobilize every resource necessary.
So significantly today, the president did take questions from reporters in the room. He did not do that on Monday. And some of the big question marks that were at least attempted to be addressed today. One is, if this drags on before August 31st, if there are still Americans who want to get out, would the president be willing to extend that deadline? He indicated that he would be willing to do so. The other question has been, what about those who are outside of Kabul? Obviously, those who are in Kabul are having a hard enough time getting to the airport. But what about those who are throughout the rest of the country? The president answered with a one-word yes when asked if there were considerations of potential operations to extract Americans from other parts of the country. A Pentagon spokesperson during their briefing would not get into specifics, but obviously they're not ruling out the idea that some of our Americans outside of Kabul could be brought in and then taken out from the airport there, Allison.
Mike, you might be in Wilmington, but the president will not be. He scrapped his trip there to stay in D.C. tonight. Besides keeping him at the White House, how is the administration working on damage control this weekend? And I hope we'll be bringing you back.
So as when you're the White House correspondent, it's your job as often as you can be to be where the president is. That's why I was outside Camp David on Monday and then again on Tuesday. Of course, he went back to the White House very briefly before flying back to Camp David. I was at the White House on Wednesday. He was supposed to, as late as around 11 or 12 o'clock this afternoon, supposed to come to Delaware for the rest of the weekend, but they changed those plans, which is an indication not just of the damage control efforts that are clearly underway at the White House, but also the weather. There's a hurricane bearing down, as you well know, on the sort of Long Island and New England area. So that's, I think, another challenge, both that requires the president's attention being in Washington, but also makes it hard for Marine One to fly up to Delaware from Washington. But clearly this White House has been doubling down at a time when both the president and a lot of his staff was supposed to be on vacation, and it's taken a little bit longer to sort of get their acts together. But it's been a challenge, and we're trying to keep up from wherever we are, at least.
Well, Mike, you've been doing a fantastic job trying to be wherever the president is, even if he's changing his mind at the last minute. You never know. He may end up turning around and going back to Wilmington, and you'll be there. If not, we know we'll see you in D.C. very soon. Thank you for your reporting.
Thanks, Allison.
NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cubie is at the Defense Department. Courtney, the president saying that flights are leaving Afghanistan again. But earlier today, 2 U.S. officials told you no flights had taken off out of Kabul airport in about 8 hours. What was going on earlier today? What was the issue?
Yeah, that's right. And even though flights have resumed, right now it's really flight has resumed. So we're only aware of one airplane that's actually taken off.
Okay.
Basically all day today. The flights were halted for somewhere between 6 and 8 hours. It's not really clear. Then one took off, and then since then there haven't been any more. So I guess the bottom line is a serious and significant slowdown in the number of flights that have left Kabul today. And the reason is they're going into Doha, Qatar, and there's just a capacity problem there. There are so many people that have moved in, thousands that have moved in from Kabul in the past couple of days, that they just don't have the ability to take in any more people at the base there. And you mean, think about it. You have a military installation and you bring in several thousand people. You need to provide them food, water, sanitation, places to sleep. Once you hit so many thousand, you get so many thousand people in there, you just can't keep bringing more people in until you start moving them on to other locations. So there's been this scramble today among the diplomats trying to find other locations that they can bring them in. And as I said, Allison, there's been one flight that's taken off. There may be a second one. If it's not taken off yet, it's going too soon, but definitely a significant slowdown in moving people out of Kabul today.
Courtney, Reuters is reporting the U.S. is going to expand its evacuation flights from Kabul. They'll be going to Europe. Do we have any idea when those flights will start taking off and where they might be going?
So we know one location is Germany. There's a couple others that officials are talking about here, but nothing has been ironed out yet. They're looking at least one other location in Europe. There's also some talk about some locations in the Central Command region. So, you know, like I mentioned, Qatar. I'll just throw out some of the possibles that are out there just because there are large military installations. One is Kuwait, one is Bahrain. There's the potential that they could send people there. But again, what they're really looking at here is, in addition to the diplomatic talks to make sure that the host countries are comfortable with them bringing potentially a large number of refugees in, they also need to make sure that they have the ability to take care of these people. They're not going to, you know, these Afghans are leaving with a backpack, with one bag, and they have many
if
kids.
That, right? Yeah.
Exactly. They're leaving with almost nothing. So we can't just drop them off in some place and not take care of them. And so, I mean, you know, I've been talking all day today about just the logistical hurdles that, and this is just another one. The military has been bringing in supplies. Some of these flights, in fact, that have moved into Kabul today that haven't been able to leave with passengers have been bringing in additional supplies just to care for those thousands of people who are sitting at Kabul airport right now.
Courtney, it's just unbelievable to imagine. I look at the terror in those people's eyes trying to get out of there, trying to get to safety. And then you think this is just the very beginning of the journey, many of them being dropped off in places they may have never been before. With, as you said, nothing but a backpack, if that, trying to start a new life. It is just unbelievable what we are watching happen. Glad, though, to hear that at least flights are getting off the ground again. Flight, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's terrifying to watch. And when you know, some of these people, they don't have any documents. They don't have passports. They have nothing to even identify who they are. So the military, you know, they're showing up in some cases with, especially the kids don't have any identification. They're putting them on the flight. So imagine, then you get to this next location. You need to identify, you need to establish who you are. You need to go through the paperwork. Some of these P2 candidates will sit in these next locations for 14 months. while they wait their processing, and then they come to the U.S. to start their new life. So, I mean, to say that this is the beginning of their journey is even an understatement. And and you look at some of these pictures that are emerging. I mean, how do you look at those little kids and imagine what they're thinking? They don't know what's happening. They're leaving their homes, the only homes they've ever known. Their parents have got to be terrified. So it's just the video and the photos are just, they're absolutely heartbreaking to see what's going on. So the hope is the military seems pretty confident that they're going to start getting more of these people out, and they'll be able to take care of them at their next locations.
Let's hope so. And my gosh, Courtney, their courage is just mind-blowing. Thank you so much. Great to see you today.
Thanks.
With tens of thousands of Americans and Afghan allies still trapped in Afghanistan, U.S. officials are struggling to speed up those evacuations. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel shows us firsthand what it takes to get out of the country.
President Biden described the airlift in Afghanistan as efficient, picking up speed, closely coordinated with the Taliban, in which Afghans, American citizens, or those who worked closely with the U.S. can get through Taliban checkpoints and make their way, although it may be difficult, to the American base there, the last remaining American outpost, which is on a section of the Kabul airport, and then be processed on planes and airlifted out to third countries like Doha, Qatar, which is where I am right now. I just did this process. I just arrived here from that airbase in Kabul, landed in Doha. It is far more chaotic than that, far more dangerous. There are Taliban checkpoints throughout the city. Some of them are extremely aggressive. They will beat people trying to approach. They will fire in the air. And it's not just men. It's not just the translators who are out on combat missions who are trying to get to these bases. Some of them, but they're also bringing their family, their kids, their babies. There's that iconic image of a Marine reaching over the wall and extracting a baby. When you're lifting infants over a wall to bring them onto a base, that shows not just desperation, it shows the amount of chaos and improvisation that you have to do, the amount of the number of heartbreaking decisions that these soldiers and Marines are now facing, the ones manning the gate, because they don't want to just open the gates. They're afraid that there'll be a push of people who will rush onto the base. So they're facing tough, difficult decisions of who to let on, who not to let on, and in this case, when it was appropriate to reach over and grab a baby and bring them onto the base. Now, that baby has been reunited, the Marines say, with a family on the base, and they're being processed for evacuation. Once they are on the base itself is practically being overwhelmed. It is certainly stretched thin. The troops are sleeping on the ground. They're living on MREs. They are working around the clock to keep these flights moving. The airmen operating these flights are working around the clock. And it's not surprising that there are delays, because the more people they extract, the more difficult it is to place them, because it is not the extraction and not the evacuation that they were planning for. This was supposed to be an evacuation of American citizens and people who worked with U.S. allies. Instead, it has become a refugee mission, a humanitarian airlift operation, where the goals, the initial people who are supposed to be coming out are coming out, but also many other people who are just desperate to leave and are managing to get to the American airbase and who are being let in and put on flights. And now there is a huge, complicated process of figuring out where to put them and also when to stop it, because now the U.S. is setting something of a precedent by letting people in. When is it going to call it, and what will the reaction be there?
It's been a difficult week for families who lost loved ones in Afghanistan, like Anne Smedinghoff's parents. Anne was an American diplomat. She died in 2013, killed by a Taliban car bomb. Now her family's joining in on a lawsuit accusing several big banks of funding the Taliban. NBC News chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell has their story.
New allegations about how the Taliban could have financed their bombing campaign in Afghanistan and paid off local Afghan leaders, paving the way for their lightning march on Kabul. According to a lawsuit filed by 500 victims, including Gold Star families and injured soldiers, accusing some of the world's largest banks of knowingly laundering more than $100 million to the terrorists. Victims like Anne Smedinghoff, an idealistic young Foreign Service officer, seen here in front of John Kerry's plane on the tarmac bank in Kabul on March 25, 2013. 12 days later, she and 4 others were killed by a Taliban IED while delivering books to school children outside the capital. This week's news bringing it all back for her parents. How do you feel now, Tom, about seeing the Taliban in charge of Afghanistan?
All these events have been hard to watch, I think a lot about all the different work that Anne was doing, especially with Afghan women.
And she was bringing books to the children when this terrible thing happened.
Because she knew that that was the key, is to educate the children of Afghanistan for their future.
Now they've joined the lawsuit accusing big banks, including Deutsche Bank and Standard Chartered, of violating U.S. anti-terrorism laws by helping the Taliban finance their operations. The banks refuse to comment.
If companies are making money by aiding the Taliban to kill Americans, then yes, they ought to be held accountable for that. And this is the plaque.
Her parents are comforted by a garden and plaque at their hometown library and a memorial at the State Department. Later, they found what she wrote on her Foreign Service application.
A post in Kabul will require great sacrifice, but this is the reason I joined the Foreign Service, to serve my country in the best way I can.
They hope her work lives on in the people she affected, now challenged more than ever.
Facebook out with some new tools to help Afghans afraid of Taliban violence. The head of Facebook security tweeting, over the past week, our teams have been working around the clock to do everything we can to help keep people safe. NBC investigative tech reporter April Glazer has been covering this story. She joins me now. April, he also tweets, we know that no single step is enough by itself in crises like this, but we're watching closely as the situation develops and will take steps to help protect people in real time. All right, so let's get into the specifics. What is Facebook doing to help here?
Right. So people in Afghanistan are rushing to just purge stuff off their phones, off their social media profiles, because there's a real threat of having their phones seized by the Taliban and seeing, photos that could spark the ire of Taliban, that could spark more violence. And so among the new security features that Facebook is rolling out for Afghan users is a one-click tool that allows people to quickly lock their accounts. And that's supposed to prevent people who aren't already friends with the users from downloading their profile picture or seeing their posts or seeing their friends. And this is something that Nathaniel Gleicher, who you just read from, shared on Twitter yesterday.
Mm-hmm. So how about Instagram, WhatsApp? Facebook owns them as well. Are they doing things to protect their Afghan users also?
So Nathaniel Gleicher did not say anything about WhatsApp, although we do know that the Taliban have used WhatsApp to spread messages throughout Afghanistan about their siege of Kabul. But on Instagram, Gleicher said that Facebook is offering new pop-up messages to users in the region to kind of give them suggestions on how to better secure their accounts. So that way, if somebody does confiscate their phone, it will be harder to access their Instagram photographs.
April, human rights groups are trying to help these Afghans remove their social media history, scrub their digital history, but they're running into a language barrier. The help pages for social media, they're not in Pashto or Dari, the two main languages in Afghanistan. Can you tell us more about problems like that they're running into there, trying to help these folks out?
Yeah, so there are a few human rights groups that are operating outside of Afghanistan, like in Pakistan and India, that are operating these telephone helplines that people can call to get suggestions on how to scrub their social media, delete their digital data, clean their computers from documents that could be incriminating in some way. And, unfortunately, not everybody knows about those helplines. So the help center on Facebook or the help pages on Twitter or YouTube are really crucial for people looking to purge their accounts. And unfortunately, those have not been translated into the local languages in Afghanistan. So people are running into a language barrier. A lot of people speak English, of course, but people really need to get that information now because, as previous reporters have said on your program, there are checkpoints that are becoming increasingly violent and, people's phones are being confiscated and searched.
In your article, you talk about a student whose uncle was approached by the Taliban to hand over his phone. What happened?
Yeah, my colleague Sephora Smith spoke to a young woman who said that, on the way to Kabul, her relatives were traveling, and her uncle, who actually suffers from mental health issues, was asked by the Taliban to see his phone, and so they could look for pictures of the Afghan army or him with Afghan army officers. And he lied about having his phone on him, perhaps out of being nervous. And when the Taliban commanders discovered that he actually did have his phone on him, they tried to beat him, she said. And they also asked her uncle if he was a military commander. Luckily, her family was able to intervene and explain that he's mentally unwell, but it was a very startling experience for them.
Oh, for sure. It sounds really just horrific. April, thanks so much for reporting. Really important stuff.
Thank you, Allison.
10 members of an Afghan all-girls robotics team rescued. They're now in Qatar. The team's parent organization, the Digital Citizen Fund, says the Qatari government expedited the visa process for the girls and even sent a plane when their outbound flights were canceled several times. The teens were flown to a secure location where they will be able to pursue higher education.
I know that August weekends in Massachusetts are usually a great time to be outside and enjoy what's left of the rest of summer. But it looks like this storm is going to have a big impact on the Commonwealth, and we really would urge everybody to do everything they can to stay home on Sunday.
New England could get hit with its first hurricane in 30 years. Hurricane watch is in effect from Long Island to southern Massachusetts as Tropical Storm Henri works its way up the East Coast this weekend. A little further south, North Carolina is dealing with deadly flooding. And out west, more than 100 wildfires are burning. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park is covering it all from Boston.
Allison, it is a calm but dreary day, but things could take a dramatic turn later on this weekend, all courtesy of Tropical Storm Henri. And as we brace for potential impacts from strong wind gusts and heavy rain bands, out west the problem is wildfires, and they're not letting up.
The threat of Tropical Storm Henri is looming over New England as the remnants of another storm system moves out to sea. Tropical Storm Fred leaving a path of destruction for days across the southern and mid-Atlantic states before soaking the Northeast.
All of a sudden, the water started coming in through every room.
At least 2 tornadoes confirmed in Pennsylvania.
All of a sudden it got windy and windier, and we thought, this isn't good. And then we decided we better head to the basement.
To flash flooding in Massachusetts, stranding drivers.
My whole arm was just covered in mud and water, and I was like, oh, okay, we need to get out of here because this car is going to sink.
In North Carolina, 2 are dead, and at least 20 still missing after Fred dumped nearly a foot of rain, causing widespread flooding.
We're going to always lean on that side of hope that we may find somebody that is still alive that needs our help.
As communities are trying to recover from Fred, parts of the Northeast are preparing for Tropical Storm Henri, strengthening in the Atlantic and poised to become a hurricane this weekend. The storm's impact could stretch from New York's Long Island to Cape Cod and Maine.
I am very concerned about this hurricane that's heading our way.
And more extreme weather out west, with at least 100 active fires burning across 13 states. Just outside Sacramento, the counter fire exploding 10 times its size in just 2 days and forcing tens of thousands to evacuate. Firefighters struggling to contain the flames.
It's resilient. It's stubborn. It won't go away.
An unrelenting wildfire season fueled by strong winds and dry conditions, now on pace to set new records.
And back here in Boston, the path of Tropical Storm Henri could shift in the next 2 days, but folks living in coastal communities are being urged to prepare now for whatever the storm may bring.
As Tropical Storm Henri heads for the Northeast, Tropical Storm Grace is heading for its second landfall in Mexico. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins me now with the latest forecast. Michelle, let's start with Henri. If it makes a direct hit on Long Island, it would be the first hurricane to do that since Gloria in 1985. I know you and I talked about this earlier. You took my call earlier today when I was dying to know what was really going on. We were both remembering what it was like to be home from school that day, watching it all happen. That one turned out not to be too terrible, but what are the concerns? What's the latest on Henri?
Hey there, Allison. Well, number one, I will always take your phone call. Love it. But secondly, yeah, it was my birthday on that day, way back when, way back when. And yeah, it looks like we could see another landfall. So let's take a look at what's happening, because we do have some changes. We're watching changes every hour pretty much. This is a look at the satellite image. What we know right now, it's strengthening. You can see it sort of expanding, that outflow, really kind of energizing this system. And we do have alerts. We're seeing that pressure going down. That's an indication of strengthening too. We're seeing the winds picking up, another indication of strengthening. So look at all these alerts, and these are really populated areas. So hurricane watch, that's in your pink, all those cities under this hurricane watch. We have a tropical storm watch also for Stanford, places to the west. So tropical storm Henri, this is the latest. It is a very strong tropical storm. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this next advisory if it does make it to that category 1 status. But right now, 70-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving north-northwest at 6 miles per hour. So just as predicted, it's making that northwesterly turn. And as we go throughout time here, it's just in really warm water. So it really can only strengthen, right? It's really what it needs. It energizes the system, those bath waters. So later on today, tomorrow, we're going to see a category 1 storm. Cape Hatteras back to the west, Norfolk, places along the mid-Atlantic. You're going to have some rough seas tomorrow, but that is pretty much it as of right now. Again, we're going to watch this next advisory to see if that changes. Because with each run, it seems like it does shift a little bit more to the west. There's a lot of computer models showing that as well. So I wanted to stop this clock for you here right now, because I wanted to show you that category 1 symbol and status right near the eastern part of Long Island, also Block Island. So this is going to be really telling. Again, very, very populated, and we're going to have to really watch this over the next 48 hours. Then I expanded a little bit more tropical storm status into somewhere along the border. This is the latest hurricane prediction, a hurricane center prediction, somewhere along the border of Connecticut and also Rhode Island. And then it sort of could stall. That could bring a lot of rain to the western part of the storm. And then it's going to make a turn towards the right later on Monday. It's out of here by Tuesday, but Sunday and the early part of Monday, that's going to be the toughest time in terms of trees coming down, power lines coming down, power going out in August. It's going to be hot as well. Now look at this. These are computer models. A lot of lines, I know it gets confusing, but that black line, that's the hurricane model, National Hurricane Center prediction. Again, going right in the center of Connecticut and Rhode Island. I think this might change, though, with the next run. Look at all the other computer models we're looking at. It's all off to the west. A lot of them go to the west and sort of stall over New York City, parts of Connecticut. So we could see some very heavy rain in a lot of spots, and then it takes that turn to the right. Very, very telling over the next 48 hours, and really one to watch. We're looking at rainfall totals anywhere from 4 inches in some spots, but generally 1 to 3. Storm surge, that's going to be a factor too in some spots all along the coast here. We have that push of water. That's what a storm surge is, and that's where it gets dangerous. It sort of pushes over that dry land. So Newport, Provincetown, Nantucket, if you're in Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, you could see 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, so certainly something to watch. We're going to end here with the forecast in terms of rainfall. Generally 1 to 3 inches of rain, but look off towards New York City. I mentioned how there are some models pointing that it could stall, and we could see over 4 inches of rain in some spots. We're so saturated to begin with, right? With Fred, the remnants of Fred brought all that rain. Poughkeepsie, 5 inches of rain. So that's terrible news on top of the rain that we just had over the past 2 days. This is what we're watching in terms of Henri. We're going to keep you posted for sure, because I do think we have some changes coming up in the next hour or so when we get that next update.
All right, Michelle, we'll check back in. Thank you so much. Looks like we got a lot of weather coming our way. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure do. Sure.
I'm just thankful that the end result was not something heartbreaking.
A mother in Mississippi hoping other parents will learn from her mistake. Her son in the ICU with COVID after she held off on getting her kids vaccinated. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber has their story from Jackson.
Allison, vaccination rates in Mississippi have started to pick up in the last couple of weeks, increasing by more than 120%. But this state is still among the least vaccinated states in the country. For many people just now deciding to roll up their sleeves, their decision stems from personal loss or near loss. That's the case for Lakita Brown and her 17-year-old son, Keelan. Lakita, like many people, had questions about the COVID vaccines when they first became available. She thought they were too new. She wasn't sure if her family should get vaccinated. She kept looking for answers and says she just decided she and her children would get vaccinated but she almost decided too late. Her son Keelan tested positive for COVID-19, and he ended up in the ICU.
I should have done it sooner, a lot sooner. And I'm just thankful that the end result was not something heartbreaking, because it took me so long to make a decision.
Did you ever think when he was in the hospital or when he was at home that Keelan might not make it?
Yes, of course I did. He was having a lot of problems with breathing, and I cried a lot of nights while he was in ICU, and I prayed out to God to just keep him. And I'm thankful. I'm very thankful.
She wanted to talk to us, Keelan, too, even though he can barely speak above a whisper right now, because they hope others will learn from their mistake. Keelan tested positive for COVID-19 first, then his mom and brother and one-year-old nephew tested positive as well. Only one person in their household did not test positive.
Like I said, everyone in the home contracted COVID-19 except for my fully vaccinated uncle. Things can progress really fast with COVID. You may be well or just have a few symptoms today, and on tomorrow you're very, very sick, just like Keelan was.
Over 1,600 Mississippians are hospitalized because of this virus. As of Thursday evening, there were less than 10 ICU beds available in this state, but close to 100 people needing one of those beds. The state's top health official has said the only way out of this mess, this dire situation, are vaccinations.
It's time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. An odd week for stocks. On the surface, looks like everything is good. The Dow closing up 225 points today. The S&P and the Nasdaq also in the green, but it was still a losing week for the markets. So what's worrying Wall Street? Let's bring in Caleb Silver, Investopedia editor-in-chief. So, Caleb, what's wrong? Is it the Delta variant, the Fed, a little bit of both, other stuff? What's the problem?
Yeah, it's the whole gumbo, Allison, and it has been for the past several weeks. Yeah. But it's kind of like if folks who know toys from the 70s, Weebles, they wobble, but they don't fall down. Investors keep buying the dip. We haven't seen major drops yet, but we've seen a couple, and the sentiment is kind of sour. And you're feeling that in consumer sentiment, and you're feeling that in investor sentiment. And that's what's happening in the stock market. Folks are getting very defensive, buying defensive stocks, buying bonds. And if you look over in Asia and China, that's a bear market going on there in the Hang Seng Index as China cracks down across all industries. So there's a lot of tricky stuff going on right now.
All right, this brings us to our term of the week, market breadth. What is that all about?
Yeah, well, it has nothing to do with halitosis at the New York Stock Exchange, but it does have to do with the sentiment and the number of stocks, the number of stocks going up versus the number of stocks going down. So in a bull market, usually you see market breadth where more stocks are going up than down. Right now, even though stocks have kind of danced around record highs, more stocks actually in the big averages, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, falling than advancing. It's the big stocks that are rising, which is driving the market higher. So market breadth is weak right now, and that's one of those indicators we look at, Allison, to get a sense of how sentiment is among investors and how strong their conviction is in buying stocks.
Caleb, we got a glimpse of the future from Boston Dynamics and Tesla this week, and it basically looks like we're about to be replaced with robots. I'll let you explain this little sci-fi section of our segment today.
Yeah, this is just downright terrifying. This is Boston Dynamics, a robotics maker that has been creating robots. Look at this thing. This thing could kick our butts. This thing, they've been creating robots for years. This thing can do parkour, Allison. God. So this is a prototype they're developing, but this will be out pretty soon. And look at that thing jumping all around the factory floor there. It's going to be running out on the football field before we know it. Very terrifying indeed, but this is the future. And Tesla now getting in the act as well. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, introducing Tesla's bot recently. He says it's going to be a friendly bot, and it's going to be powered just like a Tesla. Tesla is basically a robot on wheels. That's coming soon, too. So I don't know if we need these or not, but robots are coming. And if they're anything like this, we're all in a lot of trouble. That's very terrifying.
Oh, my God. They used to be like cute little, you know, they looked more like your pet and moved around on wheels. And now they can do like basically touchdown dances. And like you said, just totally replace us. OK, we're going to move on from that one because I'm completely freaked out. So what's on tap next week?
On tap next week, we're going to be looking closely at the U.S. housing market, which we know has been red hot. It has been cooling, though. We're seeing prices cool down in major cities across the country. You're seeing it in your own zip codes around here. But rents, on the other hand, have been flying sky high. Rents are being raised right now across major cities in America. We're going to be looking at new and existing home sales, mortgage applications, and then a check on the consumer, right? The consumer sentiment, as we talked about last week, that's been a little bit shaky right now as folks are feeling inflation or the COVID-19 variant. So we're watching that, and we're watching their in expectations for future inflation, because that gives us a sense of how much they think they're going to spend going forward. Also, the Fed heads for the hills, the big Jackson Hole symposium they do every summer, fly fishing and talking about economics. You'll see that at the end of the week, and there'll be some policy discussion about tapering or reducing those asset purchases that we've been discussing.
So, Caleb, I feel the opposite about that as I do about robots. The robots freak me out, but I would love to go fly fishing with the Fed and talk about tapering. That sounds like a perfect holiday.
Yeah, look at that. Jerome Powell, all casual out there in the Tetons. It's beautiful out there. I've been to the Fed Symposium in Jackson Hole. I don't know what kind of work they get done over there, but the sightseeing is awesome, and the food is pretty good, too.
All right, I got to get invited next time around. Caleb, always a pleasure to have you on. We'll catch you next Friday.
See you next Friday.
Texas state lawmakers back at work for the first time in weeks. 3 House Democrats were on the floor last night, ending their 5-week standoff over a restrictive voting rights bill. But that fight sure isn't over yet. NBCNews.com senior reporter Jane Tim has been all over this story from the very start. And it seems like the start was a long time ago, Jane. We know more than 50 House Democrats left the state over a month ago. They were lobbying in Washington. 3 of them broke ranks, and they're now back in Austin. Why now? And what are you hearing from the rest of the Democratic caucus?
You know, I think the pressure was just starting to mount. Republicans had vowed to arrest these members and drag them back to Austin, but I think the political pressure did the work for them. You know, I think that with COVID surging, the governor getting testing positive for COVID-19, Delta filling up Texas hospitals, they said, you know, I think it was just the work was just mounting up. They had to get back to work. The rest of the caucus, not so happy. They've put out some statements. They're pretty annoyed. Let's just put it that way. There was one member who tweeted yesterday, they could have told us. These are members who have been talking nonstop. This is one, 34 members put out this statement saying essentially that they were really kind of mad. And then they argued that the quorum wasn't actually there, that the Republicans were sort of overstating the attendance. But I think at the end of the day, the political pressure is on, and there's a significant number of these Texas Democrats who did spend a month in Washington who are ready to get back to work.
But I mean, you could have told us. I do see their point there just a little bit, right? Jane, let's talk more about the Democrats who haven't returned. Anyone still in D.C.? What's their plan? What's the update there?
Yeah, so most of them came back last week, or actually, all of them came back last week. But I do think you could see some Texas Democrats pop up in Washington again. We know that H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, is going to come back up. Democrats have vowed to pass it out of the House when they get back at August 23rd. So I think you could see a couple Texas Democrats go back to Washington, continue their lobbying. I don't see a plane filling up and going back with the full group. This is a caucus that I think is it's splintered at this point. But aside from that, I do think we are going to see some considerable fireworks. I mean, Democrats who may have gone back to the floor, they're not going to like suddenly vote yes on these bills. They're going to put up a fight. And they've been pretty successful in the past at using delay tactics to at least slow it down or try and win some negotiating power, to win some wins for them.
Yeah, they got some good moves. They've certainly been showing them to us all summer long. They know how to slow things down here. Am I correct in that there's a hearing Monday in the House on the voting bill? What are you expecting there?
Yeah, so they initially scheduled it for tomorrow before moving it to Monday. Not sure what is happening behind the scenes, but I think we'll find out on Monday. I do know that COVID is a consideration here, though. So usually these hearings, and we've had what feels like a half dozen of these really intense, big public hearings on bills like this already this year. And usually they have hundreds of people sign up to testify in person. But the Texas House does not have a mask mandate. And I think there's some genuine concern that they don't want to flood this legislature full of people who could get infected. We even know there's COVID positive members in the Texas House who go to work and sit in a quarantine chamber, is what they call it, and vote from the sidelines because they need to have all their members in the House to keep this very slim quorum. But there's definitely some concerns. So I think some of these activism events are going to be outside. I know there's a honk for voting rights protest planned Monday morning. We'll see quite some noise for reporters who are outside the legislature.
Oh, yeah. Honk for voting rights. We know you'll have that and much more next week. Jane, in the meantime, have a great weekend.
You too, Allison.
Faster travel times, a smaller carbon footprint, and better connected metro areas. Just a few reasons the Biden administration wants to build high-speed rail systems like the ones in Europe, Japan, and China. But could potential battles with private landowners put the brakes on those plans? Here's NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman.
America has been talking about high-speed rails since 1965, shortly after Japan introduced its first line. Sleek bullet trains whisking commuters, families, and travelers between cities faster than a car and cheaper than flying. The American dream of high-speed rail looks like the systems across Europe, Japan, and China, where super-fast trains connect Beijing to Shanghai, roughly 900 miles apart. That's similar to the distance between Chicago and New York, which takes 21 to 22 hours on Amtrak. But the Beijing-Shanghai train does it in 4 hours and 18 minutes.
I do think that high-speed rail is important with the way the U.S. is laid out.
Amtrak's Acela from D.C. to Boston is America's first and only operational high-speed rail. It hits top speeds of 135 miles per hour, but it breaks down to about 62 miles per hour for most of the 7-hour journey, making it feel more like a regular train. There are also 2 other projects under construction in California and Florida, and another under contract in Texas. These projects, along with the Biden administration's historic investment in passenger rail in the infrastructure bill, provide a beacon of hope for the country's high-speed rail ambitions. But here's why those dreams will likely not materialize anytime soon. Building new railroad tracks is no easy feat.
Getting the property rights for a straight path between point A and point B is really difficult.
Texas Central, the private development company leading the Dallas to Houston high-speed rail project, is dealing with pressure from critics who say their plans will abuse eminent domain. On its website, Texas Central says it will minimize disruptions to landowners and negotiate fairly in accordance with all Texas laws.
We've made it incredibly difficult to sign off enough paperwork, to get the right workers at the site, and to get everybody to agree on what needs to happen. If we can't cut through this bureaucracy, we'll never get the rail improvements that we need in this country.
The privately funded rail company Brightline Trains is building the high-speed rail system that will connect Orlando and South Florida, with an estimated completion date of late 2022. It hasn't been a smooth ride, though. The company dealt with a 2-year, multi-million-dollar legal battle to get approval for just one of its environmental permits for only one portion of the 170-mile project. The ease and flexibility of driving also make it harder for high-speed rail to compete in the U.S.
Driving makes a lot of sense. Even though it takes more time, it can be a lot less hassle and certainly cost way less money. At the end of the day, the car just ends up being, for most people, their first thought and often the most convenient option for them.
Hefty price tags also play a role in high-speed rail construction.
California's high-speed rail has spent billions of dollars without a single train leaving the station.
California announced its initial business plan for the 670-mile high-speed rail from San Francisco to Los Angeles in 2000, more than 2 decades ago. Estimated price, $25 billion, including an extension to San Diego. Construction didn't kick off till 2015. Now, the total cost is edging close to $100 billion. The first phase was initially planned to start carrying passengers in 2025, but that's been pushed back till 2029. There's $66 billion dedicated to passenger rail in the infrastructure bill, the largest investment in rail since Amtrak started more than 50 years ago. But only $12 billion of the investment is for high-speed rail.
This is really about the entire Northeast corridor.
Will it be enough to get us to a national network of high-speed rail like some other countries have or are working on? No, this initial investment will not be enough to get us all the way there.
Richardson back in the starting line, competing in the Prefontaine Classic this weekend, going up against the Jamaican sprinters who swept the podium in Tokyo, while Richardson was sidelined with a drug suspension. NBC News senior national correspondent Tom Yamas talked with Richardson about her return to racing.
Hey, Allison, she's the fastest woman in America who couldn't run in Tokyo. Sha'Carri Richardson took the track by storm at this year's Olympic trials, winning the 100-meter race in spectacular fashion. You may remember that. But after testing positive for THC, she was suspended and left off Team USA. Now she's back on the scene and ready to compete. First question, how are you feeling?
I am feeling excited. I'm feeling overjoyed to getting back to doing what it is that I love to do.
Sha'Carri Richardson says she's back and ready to run, set to hit the same track where her dreams came true and where they just as quickly slipped away. How was it to watch the Tokyo Games?
It was a moment of bitterness, but at the same time, it was sweet because it just gives me more. It gives me more time. It gives me more to show the world that I'm here to stay. And it just guarantees that I'm going to be here just a little bit longer in the game. But definitely watching it made me want to push forward and just grow from that.
Just weeks after triumphantly winning the 100 meters and punching her ticket to Tokyo, Sha'Carri failed a drug test, testing positive for THC, violating anti-doping rules. The 21-year-old telling Savannah she used marijuana after the sudden loss of her biological mother days before trials.
Right now, I'm just putting all of my time and energy into dealing with what I need to deal with to heal myself. Don't judge me because I am human. I'm you. I just happen to run a little faster.
You took responsibility. Why?
I know what I did. I know I'm responsible, and I'm here to take what it is that I have to take from the choices that I decided to make. You can't run from reality. It's still going to be there no matter how long you choose to ignore it, no matter how long you choose to think it's not going to think it's going to go away.
There's been a discussion now about the use of marijuana and rules and laws that may or may not change. Will that impact in any way anything for you going forward?
No, not at all. If those rules do change, honestly, I'm just blessed that and proud of the fact that I could do that for other athletes.
And now Sha'Carri says she's taking steps to better her mental health, joining a growing chorus of elite athletes who are reminding their fans we're human too. I'm doing a whole lot better, and I'm actually proud to just continue on this journey. We want to perform for you guys, and we want you to put on the best performance for you guys, but at the same time, we're here just like you are. When we step off the track, when we step off the football field, when we step off the court, we go live life just like you do. It's just for a certain amount of time, we just look like superheroes.
She is 100% Sha'Carri Richardson.
Tomorrow, all eyes will be back on Sha'Carri at the Prefontaine Classic in Oregon, where she'll face off against the trio of Jamaican women who swept the 100 meters in Tokyo, including a first-time matchup with the two-time 100-meter gold medalist Elaine Thompson-Herah.
With this first race coming back, it's a thank you, because at the end of the day, I didn't make a mistake, but that doesn't take away from my talent. That doesn't take away from who I am.
Sha'Carri will also run the women's 200 meters alongside Allison Felix and Gabby Thomas from Team USA. You can watch the Prefontaine Classic this weekend on NBC and streaming on Peacock. Allison, this is going to be an amazing race.
Prince Harry stepping back into the spotlight for the upcoming release of his memoir, revealing some big news about the book at a surprise polo match in Colorado. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has more from London.
Hey, Allison, that's right. Prince Harry and Meghan are getting back out there, back to the work that they so love doing. And it sounds like we're going to be seeing a lot more of them very soon. Take a look. This week, Prince Harry is back doing what he loves. And according to the co-author of Sussex biography, Finding Freedom, it's a sign of things to come. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex reportedly gearing up for a busy fall and winter, entering what co-author Omid Scobie calls a new era of visibility in the updated version of his book. Telling People magazine they seem to be existing in a different place, and that place is much healthier. And yesterday, for the first time in years, the Duke of Sussex got back in the saddle, hosting a surprise polo match in Aspen, Colorado for his longtime charity, Sentebale, alongside his friend and professional polo player, Nacho Figueres. The event raising critical support and money for children in South Africa impacted by poverty and HIV/AIDS. But Harry not just suiting up, also donating $1.5 million from his upcoming memoir, as Harry and Meghan plan to step back into that new era of visibility, a new stage with their growing family far away from the palace and the UK tabloids.
So I want clarity. Was the move about getting away from the UK press, because the press is, you know, is everywhere, or was the move because you weren't getting enough support from the firm?
It was both.
Both.
Hey, Melissa, do you have a second?
But seeming more comfortable in the American media spotlight.
It's my 40th birthday, and I've got an idea.
I know what it is.
Really?
My first guess is it another photo shoot under a tree where you're looking very peaceful.
Peaceful under a tree is me every day.
The Duchess marking her 40th birthday on August 4th with a video announcing a mentorship program to support women. And along with her book, Harry's new docuseries, and their deals with Netflix and Spotify, it's all fueling their return, as the royal family still deals with the constant spotlight, even including the new HBO animated comedy, The Prince, about the royals.
Sorry we're late, our flight was delayed. You know, JetBlue. We don't know.
That show's creator saying this month that Harry seemed to have a sense of humor about it.
Now, Allison, they are also reacting to international events, putting a statement on their Archwell Foundation website, reacting to the news out of Afghanistan. Of course, Harry served there, and also to the earthquake in Haiti, saying they are speechless and heartbroken.